Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alex Gordon, and I'm going to be talking about the local food system, and I'm going to explain to you our food system and how agriculture works. So, what is the definition of local food? Technically, there is no definition for local food. At least it's not official. So, why can no one define what a local food system is? It's because people do not have the same access to the same opinions and information around the world, so it varies. My definition of local food is food produced relatively close to where it is sold. According to Congress, local or regionally produced food is food that is produced within 400 miles or less of its origin or within the state in which it is produced. Farmers markets and grocery stores often consider local food to be produced from within 100 to 50 miles. In order to understand what a local food system is and how our food system has developed over time, we have to look at the origins of agriculture. Up until the past, say, 12,000 years, give or take, most humans are understood by anthropologists to have been foraging nomads. Around this time, humans living in Mesopotamia sporadically started to cultivate crops such as barley and grains. Farming ensured their food security, which made it very appealing at the time. Now, this era is known to be the first manipulation of nature to produce food. This is known as the agricultural revolution. During this time, people began to settle down, colonize, and strictly live off of locally produced foods. This was the beginning of civilization as we know it. Since then, agriculture has spread throughout most of the world, while dramatically impacting the way we live, the way we interact with our environment, and how we get our food. Agriculture has dramatically impacted the way human civilization has developed throughout history. Great civilizations have risen and fallen due to their dependence on agriculture, thus creating a demand for improved agricultural methods throughout the ages, up until even today. Many farmers domesticated animals for a variety of functions, which mainly consisted of creating cheaper agricultural labor and more efficient farming. Slavery was created to make agricultural labor cheaper and more efficient. Up until the Industrial Revolution, slavery was a huge means, and same with the domestication of animals, to create more efficient and cheaper labor. The Industrial Revolutions produced fossil fuels available to all and machinery as a replacement for physical labor. Fossil fuels enabled labor efficiency to skyrocket as they contain extreme levels of concentrated energy, which led to the largest increase of human population growth in recorded history that we are currently a part of. During the 1950s and 60s, the greatest change and influence on human civilization since the agricultural revolution, in my opinion, is the Green Revolution, which is basically the industrialization of agriculture. And it was designed after the Great Depression, when many farmers in the USA demanded more productive farming methods in order to combat their hunger and world hunger in general. The ideologies came out that are still being developed today are used by most farmers, and some of the common practices that are used by these farmers are the use of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, chemical fertilizers, fossil fuel, powering machines, factory farms, monoculture, which is those giant cornfields, or just lots of one single crop, which is environmentally detrimental, by the way. Geoengineering, which is changing the earth, mending it unnaturally, and the genetic modification of organisms, GMOs, which, by the way, is not labeled in our country. A lot of our food is genetically modified. Most crops like corn, wheat, and many others are, and in over 33 countries it is actually banned and made illegal, which is very interesting, as studies have shown interesting results on those organisms, and we consume a lot of that in our country. So overall, the Green Revolution played a significant role because it allowed for the entire global food system to become centralized, because people all over the world began began relatively using the same identical farming practices and needing the same equipment, chemicals, seeds, all these things that you have to buy from an expensive manufacturer, which were mainly in the Western world, mainly in the United States. And so the world became dependent on these corporations that provided these products in order to grow their food and in order for the food system to, be the green revolution. As agriculture has been centralized and the food system has been centralized into these large corporations such as Monsanto, DuPont, Dow Chemicals, a lot of farmers have been forced into buying genetically modified organisms through the Monsanto patent, otherwise risk being at persecution if they don't buy their Monsanto seeds every year, rather than being able to harvest their seed from the last crop, which is a serious economic violation of just natural rights in general. But generally speaking, what current green revolution has enabled is farmer dependence on chemical companies, oil, machinery, biotech companies, and even the government, in order to gain subsidies and gain these government contracts. So a lot of large farms have been outsourcing or just pushing aside small farms because the old mom and pop farms, they can't get subsidies and loans, and they ended up not being able to compete with the large farms. So this is a huge problem in our nation, and this is why small farms are basically non-existent, and why agriculture has been centralized, and why so few people know how to grow food these days. It's really just these, very few, less than 1% of farmers. So it's something to understand if you're analyzing our food system. From 1790 to 1990, about 200 years, we started at 90% of the United States labor force being farmers, to 1990 being less than 2%. In 200 years, it dropped from 90% to 2%. And now, today, 2013, less than 1% of the United States' labor force are farmers. What else has changed?
Whatever happened to the Green Revolution that started in the 1960s that was going to feed the world? That revolution may not be over. Today's global corporate interests have redefined the agricultural industry. The idealistic dream of feeding the world has been transformed into a crushing world of corporate land grabs, genetic seed manipulation, weather modification, and depleted water sources.
So with all the agricultural problems in our nation and around the world sparked by the Green Revolution, some people are beginning to ask questions as is not becoming more efficient, is not increasingly becoming favored, it is actually destroying our ecologies and are creating more problems than solving. So some questions are alternative methods such as organic and natural farming. Now, they are both ancient methods of agriculture. Natural farming is basically no lab-made harmful pesticides or anything else, and in some cases no fertilizer or even machines to mend the soil, because nature organically breaks down nutrients inside of a healthy environment. So the philosophy is to work with nature rather than against it. Organic is similar, but it is not quite as extensive since it's more mainstream. You can get certified to be organic. Basically, if you follow the principles of not using genetically modified organisms, harmful chemicals that are detrimental to health and nature and self, and generally speaking, decent practices that are somewhat considered to be environmentally mutualistic, as well as beneficial in the long term for an environment. So both of these farming methods produce fresh produce from that is usually sold locally and ripe, as these foods are very high quality and contain less toxins and are usually more nutrient dense than conventional or industrial farm produce. So currently today, world hunger is increasing. The 925 million hungry people in 2010 in the world, they're not going anywhere. That number is not decreasing. Currently, there are about 7 billion people in the world, with an estimated 925 million people, about a billion, let's say it's almost there. 13% or almost 1 in 7 people are hungry, and this is a rapidly increasing rate. So world hunger is something to look at because economically, the current model of agriculture is creating economic and and hunger disparity throughout nations using this. So a lot of nations are beginning to question their agricultural methods. So has centralized industrial agriculture worked, and can it be sustainable? Well, on average, food today travels about 1,500 miles from a farm to a plate. That's a long way, considering in our country, we have a lot of space, yet we import a lot of our food, and not only that, we ship it from all across the country. It's not usually in the state. It's not usually, within a couple hundred miles. It's very far. So there's lots of shipping, lots of transportation from grocery store to your plate to the restaurants. It's everywhere. Poverty and world hunger rates have never been worse. Waste, environmental degradation, and disease, just in general for ecologies and in people, a lot of it's found in diet, has never been worse. So global food prices are continually on the rise, as well as oil. It's something to mention. It allowed for industrial development, our agricultural system, through the Green Revolution, but it only made our food system worse. So at the current rate, it is not sustainable. There are alternatives, however. So my question for you is, do you know where your food comes from and how it gets distributed to you? So this is the common fallacy of what a traditional common animal farm looks like by the American people. Maybe once upon a time this was true, but this is not very common anymore. Unless you know your farmer, your food is probably not from somewhere like here. Most meat and animal products in the USA are produced in factory farms, and factory farms are basically compact indoor facilities that squeeze as many animals as possible into a small cramped space in order to achieve high yields and productivity. But this method of animal raising raises some serious consequences, such as disease, disfigured animals, lots of health regulations that are not found in traditional farming, and harmful environmental waste, which runs off into our natural resources and runs off eventually into the ocean and all of our global ecologies. At least most meat is raised in the USA. Grass-fed beef and pasture-raised livestock have pros and cons. Generally speaking, in factory farms, when you have lots of livestock, they are going to grow up malnutrition because they're going to be exposed and overfed with fat grains, that cost a lot. They cost 4 times more than their natural foods, and not only that, they're harmful because they release lots of methane because they're metabolically undigestible and not meant for cows. So there's better farming practices when you let cows and other livestock, eat their natural foods. They metabolically ingest it better. It's cheaper, and not only that, it's better for an environment because their waste doesn't run off into our natural resources and pollutes. What it actually does, if done properly through crop rotation, livestock can actually benefit the soil and make it healthier as the soil builds. They move back during the seasons to come back and reinvigorate the soil through the soil cycles. So basically, you're going to have healthier food, cheaper cost. You're going to have better quality farming. The animals are going to be happier. They're going to get some space. There's going to be better, more environmentally responsible methods, and that are actually going to be beneficial for the environment. So you're doing a good job just by getting, being a consumer of these products, and you're supporting a good industry that has traditionally been the true strength of this country. So the business cycle is based upon the free market. The principles of the free market are all about the consumer. You give the people what they want. The people have demands and they want things. And if they do not have the choice to choose which business that they will support, then what you have is a backed up system, usually corporatism. And in this case, what we have is a lot of government intervention and corporatism. And that system generally, throughout history, backs up and enslaves consumerism, and it doesn't allow the free market to prosper, and thus economic development slows, and it's not very functional historically. The Economic Research Service report, ERS, report summary of 2010 by the U.S. Department of Agriculture suggests that consumers who value high-quality food products with low environmental impact are willing to pay more for locally produced foods, place importance on product quality, nutritional value, methods of raising a product, and those methods' effects on the environment, and supporting local farmers, or support local farmers who can recirculate wealth back into the local economy. Now, recirculating wealth back into the local economy is something that not a lot of people are talking about today. When you have a trade between the local farmers, a local exchange, what that does is it keeps the value and wealth of your community in your community, rather than export it or import it and have all this complicated, most likely unfair trade with other countries or throughout the nation, where prices are different, wealth is different, and generally speaking, where there's a lot of distance and where labor and energy costs, lots of different factors go into play. It's just a waste. So you don't get fair trade when dealing with long distance trade. Generally speaking, when you recirculate wealth back into the local economy, everyone begins to benefit. The price of food goes down due to competition because the infrastructure starts to build. And once you have that, the price of food stabilizes, and generally speaking, the food system greatly improves. The future of local food in this country is greatly dependent on the individual states and the movements within communities. So in the future of Georgia's local food movement, which is where I live, most food available could potentially be produced locally and be produced with better farming practices if we, the consumers, the people, ask for it. If you want to know more about this movement in Georgia, check out georgiaorganics.org. Georgia and its local food. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm an extreme advocate, and I like to do a lot of work regarding our food system. It's basically my life. The USDA Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food initiative is currently touring around Athens, Georgia, UGA. The goal of the program, by the Agricultural Deputy of the United States, is to educate the next generation of ranchers, farmers, and consumers by letting them participate in a national conversion to develop local and regional food systems to support small and mid-sized farms, which would reinvigorate rural, suburban, and even urban communities throughout the entire state. So it's basically a grassroots movement to support local food. Metro Atlanta's local food, there's lots of food. There's lots of farmers markets, not as many. There's CSA, Support Agriculture, You Pick Farms, grocery markets with local food, produce stands, lots of old agricultural advocates in this state, community gardens, farmer school and table programs, etc. But the overall idea is to reintroduce local food where it's really needed, like in schools and prisons, even in your backyard, where in urban environments where there's these food deserts where at least 95% of the population of Atlanta has no access to local food and fresh produce. So this is a problem, and I believe in a lot of cities that local food is going to be increasingly advocated because people will realize the health benefits and the economic benefits of knowing your farmer and knowing your food. The centralized industrial current food system versus the local food system of the past and of the developing future. So agriculture has evolved, and the local food system is proving to be successful. But on average, today in our current food system, food travels about 1,500 miles from a farm to a plate. With local food, usually more than 10 times that transportation distance, and energy waste is cut, and that's a significant amount of money and energy saved. Not only that, you can grow your own food, you can be closer, you can have community support agriculture, you can reduce that waste by so much, create cheaper food infrastructure, and generally speaking, improve the quality of your food system. If you want it, or if consumers want it, by all means. Today, industrial agriculture is completely dependent on oil to operate machinery, and create all these chemical fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides, and all this food distribution requires a fuel that is becoming more expensive, and that is what is mainly increasing the prices of food. And generally speaking, food is becoming very expensive. The USA used an estimated 50 million pounds of pesticides, and during 1948, and farmers back then had about a 7% crop loss. In the year 2000, the USA used about 1 billion pounds of pesticides, and farmers that used those pesticides had about a 13% crop loss. So, after 60 years of using the same or developed pesticides haven't gotten any better. We're using about 200 times more pesticides than we used, and now it's about double the crop percentage loss. So really, we're not becoming more efficient. We're not becoming more advanced. We like to think that technology is advancing, but simply, maybe the iPhone is, or your TV, or maybe a computer. But the fact is that agriculture is still back, right with the beginning of the Green Revolution. It has not advanced very much. And what is advancing is local food systems, food systems that are more conscious, that work with nature, that are more economical, that are more environmentally beneficial and beneficial to society in a whole. So, as oil is increasing, the local food system is becoming more appealing. In conclusion, industrial nations such as ours have enough resources to change, and we could change overnight if we really wanted to. Local food systems can be a great sustainable solution, and alternative food systems and farming methods are needed for humanity to progress. Natural and organic farming methods are the most functional farming methods known to date. So what I'm advocating is to support local food and know your farmer, know your food, and save humanity. This presentation is called The Local Food System by me, Alex Gordon. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Dr. Seuss.
I think it would be newsworthy. Here's Tom with the weather.
Thank you for watching. Comment, share, and question. Subscribe for more videos.